Here we go. Yee. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Author Ever After conversation with a publishing expert. Today is really fun. Today, we are talking to Stephanie Anderson, who is the founder of Alt19 Creative. She is a cover designer. She is also a YA romance author. So she knows this industry very, very well. We met through the cover design directory back in the fall, and I just had such a fun time chatting with her. She generously agreed to come in and do not one, but two 90-minute sessions to help us learn how to DIY our covers when that is a better or perhaps the only option that we have. I am a child of an artist, a woman who made her income creating art. My mother did not give me a single design gene, not a single one. I took after my father, who designs cats by doing a snowman and putting pokey ears on it. That is my level of artistic ability, and my design ability. When I used to work as a contract writer and I would dummy things up, my boss would always kind of pat me on the back and say, stick to the words. And but I know that there are some times when it's, even if we can't DIY it, knowing the language, knowing how a cover designer is working can be really, really helpful for us to be able to be a good client and to get what we want from our designers. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Stephanie Anderson of Alt19 Creative and let her take over. And so sorry, before that, this is interactive. So if you have questions, pop them into the chat. And sometimes I might call on you to ask them yourself if it seems like it'll be more easier, or I will ask them on your behalf. Stephanie.
Well, great. Thank you for having me. I, too, am a child of an artist. My dad was, he was so talented. He did a lot of 3D sculptures. He was a professional knife maker. And he did a lot of scrimshaw on ivory, and he could take like a pen and etch this beautiful design and then take a toothpick and fill it in with color. And it's just fabulous art, tiny, tiny stuff. And I used to be like you, where I come from this creative family, but I didn't get anything. In high school, I was a math and science person. But I was on yearbook in high school, and my love for yearbook is what led to the career that I have now, which is book design. So I don't just do covers, I do covers and interiors. I am really a big proponent of having a very cohesive book project from the cover to the interior. And if you ever do any of those, you've probably heard a lot recently about people doing Kickstarter campaigns and doing fancier interiors. That's the type of work I do on interiors, is where we have a step up from like your typical vellum or Atticus or basic layout. So just a little bit of background on me. I'm very excited to be here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through a questionnaire. And then from that questionnaire, we are going to do a lot of research. The first thing that a lot of DIY people miss out is research. And the research is mainly looking at covers on Amazon. If you are in any of the cover design groups where people post their cover and ask for critique, one of the most common things that people will say is, I don't know what the genre is. You need to go on Amazon and research your genre. And I'm going to show you how to do that, because a lot of people don't know. So people will tell you this all the time, and you just, I don't know how to do it. So I will show you how to do it. Also show you how to look at maybe some upcoming release covers, so you'll know where the industry or where your particular genre may be heading. And then we are going to start looking at graphics. And I think that's probably where we'll end today. We're going to probably hopefully have time to create a couple of mock-ups. We have Tammy. We are actually doing a cover for her during this process. So the goal today will be researching her genre that she's writing in, and then hopefully getting to where we're creating some mock-ups. And I'm going to show you these mock-ups and you're going to say, oh, that's ugly. But all I can say is tune in next week, because we're going to take that mock-up from ugly to something a little bit more jazzed up. And I do work in Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is probably not the best tool unless you know it really well for the DIYer. So I'm going to show you how to do it in Photoshop, and then we're going to take next week, we're going to work on doing it in Canva. Now, we're not going to be able to do quite the same level of cover that we would do in Photoshop, but we can do stuff in Canva that will give us something that will work for our book cover for you DIYers. Okay, so let's get started. The most important thing to know about cover design is, who is the book cover for? Is the book cover for you? Should it be what you like? No, it needs to be for your reader. And you're going to have a bunch of different readers and what they like and what they don't like. And a bunch of people are going to debate on, I don't like illustrated covers. I don't like man chest covers. I don't like klitsch couples in a hold covers, things like that. There are so many people, like for me as a reader, I am drawn to illustrated covers. If you look at my bookshelf, pretty much every single cover, every single book I buy is an illustrated cover. And if you went back all the way to the 90s, when I started reading romance and looked at every cover I've ever bought, there's probably only a handful that actually have images of couples. That's my thing. But you'll see some people that say, oh, I hate illustrated covers. So know who your people are. And if you have a good readers group, it's always good to ask them what type of covers they like. However, it really depends on your genre. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit. But what I'm going to show you in just a few minutes, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you give me a minute, let me pop up this questionnaire. Now, when you work with a cover designer, in most cases, they are going to send you what they may call a brief.
Is that, oh, are we seeing, there it is. Okay, now we see it.
We're going to zoom in. Can you see it?
It is perfect now. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why this is the questionnaire I ask, I actually have two different questionnaires. I have one that is specific to photo stock manipulated book covers, but I also do custom character illustrated covers, and I have a different questionnaire for that. But we're going to look at this stock questionnaire that I have, and I'm going to kind of go over the reasons why we ask these questions. So when you are working with a cover designer, or if you are DIYing, I'm going to provide this questionnaire for you so you can use it for yourself. Go through and answer these questions, because you'll want to address possibly each one in your book cover. Okay, so the first thing is this is my basic question timeline and how you hear it. But the most important thing is, of course, the book title. And if you have a series title and what your author name is, and any other wording that you want to include on the title. Some people put like a sweet romantic comedy or a sweet small town romance. Whether you put those things on your cover or not, it's some people believe in them and some people don't. I personally like those covers that have like some sort of hook that's going to give me a little bit of information on maybe the tropes that are in the book that's meant to kind of pull me in. So always think about any additional wording that you can include, but it needs to be limited because we don't want to have a cover full of just nothing but text. Okay. Now, the biggest, most important question is, what is the book's main genre? Now, I know we're all romance designers here. I'm sorry, romance authors. So we are in romance, but romance is such a broad topic? Are you historical romance? If you're historical, are you maybe a Victorian era? Are you Regency era, or maybe something medieval, or maybe more of like a 50s romance or a roaring 20s? So it's important to know what your subgenre is. It could be a small town romance, it could be a paranormal romance, it could be mafia, lots of different subgenres. And so that's one of the most important things you need to know, is target your genre. So when you go onto Amazon or KDP and you upload your book, what categories are you going to put that book in? Okay, so that's what we need to know. And that's where our research is really going to be crucial in that subgenre, because covers have a certain look, they have certain elements for each subgenre, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. I also like to know the tropes of the story. I think that's very important, because some tropes are more popular than others. And if you have a popular trope and your title doesn't necessarily give us that trope, there are certain elements that we can put on the cover that will tell that trope. Small town is probably the easiest thing to do, because we can put our couple in a small town setting. Cowboy, of course, is very easy to do. If you're doing cowboy romance, we need to have a cowboy on the cover. And then another question is, who are your comp authors? Who do you consider, if you, who would you put your book up next to and say, it's like this small town author or this mafia author, whoever. So it's important to know who your comp authors are. And this question right here is probably one that unfortunately is not portrayed enough, especially when it comes to illustrated style covers. And that is, what is your heat level? There are so many covers that the book may be super steamy, but it has this cartoony illustrated cover where the people are fully clothed. They're not in some sort of close embrace or anything like that. And so you get no sense of heat level from the cover. And there's a lot of illustrated covers out there that just look clean, and they're not. So this, as far as being a cover designer, this is an area that I would love for people to focus more on. So your readers know, if they don't want to read a steamy book, they can tell by the book cover that they're not going to get steamy. Okay, so know your heat level. I use a scale, but this is a pretty universal scale. Number one is clean, so you could fall under the clean and wholesome category on Amazon. 2 is sweet, so it's a little bit of more touchy-feely, kissing, usually everything from the neck up, maybe a little bit more, usually fade to black, no description. Then we have some that's a little bit more sensual. And then we have the steamy, and then we have just flat out erotica. And erotica just typically means there's no story. It's just all steamy, steamy scenes, okay? And then the next question I like to ask is, what is the tone or mood of your book? And I have some descriptive words, and I think these are very important, because if you're doing a romantic comedy, so it's real humorous and light and funny, but you have a very serious couple on your book cover, your book cover is not setting the tone or mood of your book. So your imagery really needs to set that tone and mood. So that's why I like these words, sexy, humorous, witty, emotional, sweet, suspenseful, and on and on. And if so think of those terms that you would describe your book and the content within. Okay. And where and when does your story take place? What is the setting? Is it a beach? Is it a small town? So a lot of those settings can be a trope that's in your book. Is there mountains? Are we on a farm? Are we on a ranch? Are we in the city? So there's the little things that we can add to a cover to portray that setting for the most part. And the next thing is describing your characters. Now, when we're doing photo manipulated covers, sometimes it's absolutely impossible to find a couple, if you wanted a couple on your cover, that fits your couple to a T. That's one of the advantages of hiring a cover designer, and that the cover designers are going to be able to change. You may see a perfect photo, you love the embrace, but the hair color's wrong. The guy doesn't have a beard in the photo, but he has a beard in your story. So a good cover designer is going to be able to change those components of that photo for you. Whereas if you're DIY in Canva, it's a little bit more difficult to do those kind of things on a cover. So we'll get into that more hopefully during the design process. Things like tattoos, if you found a great image, but he's covered in tattoos, how you can remove those. So there's a lot of Photoshop things that we can do to an image to make it work for you. Okay. Another question I like to ask, are there any key symbols or objects that are important to your story? There is a current trend in almost all genres right now, especially in romance, of what we call object covers or discrete covers. So if you wanted to go in that direction, this question is very important. You know, maybe your main female character has a favorite flower, and the male character gives her these flowers. What kind of flowers are those? Maybe there's a dog in the story or a cat in the story. Maybe there's a vintage jewelry box that she's looking for. So things like that the cover designer would need to know to really make a cover that kind of hits those notes within the story. So think about all those little elements. And as a cover designer, there's never anything of too much information. Okay, so provide as much as you want, and then I could pull those little things, or you could pull those little things on how you could bring them into the cover. Now, the next question is, go to Amazon and search the top 100 covers in your subgenre and pick out 3 of your favorites and pick out your 3 least favorites. Now, the reason why I ask this question is because I want to know what your sense of style is. I want to know what covers you're drawn to, because even though the book cover isn't for you, it's for your reader, I still want you to like it. Okay, that's important to me. I want you to like it, and I want your readers to like it. All right. So seeing those top 3 favorites is a great way for me to determine what kind of style you like. And then seeing those 3 least favorites is a great way for me to say, we're not going in that direction. Okay. Because there's always, with each subgenre, there's always a lot of different directions that we can go in as long as we know the trends. And then the last 2 questions are just please provide a blurb or a brief description that helps me kind of visualize the story, and then anything else you want to share. Now, we are working on Tammy's cover, so I'm just going to quickly show you. Let me see where I pulled it up at. I have another screen here, so I'll bring it back over. But this is the questionnaire that Danica and Tammy completed for her book. I'm sorry, your name is Donna, but you go by Tammy, right? Or your pen name is Tammy. So I'm going to share with you what's on her questionnaire. So the title of the book is called Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. So when I look at the title, one of the things I think about first before anything else is the length of the title, because the length of the title can determine the design right away. So we have a pretty long title, sometimes is a very big word, so we need to think about that. So in my mind, just knowing the title I would be leaning more towards a title heavy cover because this title is pretty lengthy. So when you, one avenue that you can always do when it comes to cover design is look at pre-made book covers. There's many artists that offer those. So you can go to many different websites that offer pre-made book covers, and you can see if any of them would be relevant and match your book. But one of the key things you need to think about when you are looking at pre-made covers is how is that title on that pre-made, and is your title going to look good in that layout? So if the pre-made cover, it may only show one large word in a large blocky type, and then it's got this beautiful artwork around. Trying to fit your longer title may be a little bit difficult. But if you see a pre-made cover that you absolutely love, but you're not sure whether your title would work with it, contact the cover designer and just say, hey, I love this pre-made. I'm just trying to determine whether my title would work for it. Now, a good cover designer is going to be honest with you, okay? So if somebody come up to me and said, here's my title and I love this book cover, what you can do, I might flat out say, I'm sorry, but that title is not going to work with this particular book cover. Or I may offer, hey, I do have a, I will have to tweak it and move things around, but we can make it work. And I'm actually going to show you an example of that in just a few moments. I'll pull it up on my other screen. I actually had one of my authors, she did a quick romance cover, and she didn't really have time for a custom cover, and she really liked a cover that we already had on on our website. So I'm going to actually show you what the cover looked like before and how we made it work with her title. Okay, so for the pre-made cover, our title was You Owe Me a Dance. So let me pull it up. I should have already had this up, so be patient with me real quick. Any questions as I'm searching for this?
Yeah, any questions? We've got some, this is all great info, lots of noddings of heads.
Good, 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 good. All right, let's see. I can at least show you. All right, so this was the finished cover. Okay, so her title was Christmas Chemistry. And
I love that.
You owe me.
I find red and green together are so hard to work with.
Like, yes. Well, and another thing, it's funny, my sister designed the initial, my sister works with me, just to let you know, and she designed the original cover, which was this right here. Okay, so you can see some of the differences because the title my sister picked out for this, You Owe Me a Dance, it was long, but it was small words. And then Christmas Chemistry was 2 long words, so it wouldn't fill up the design like we had it in the original pre-made. So these are how things can be tweaked in the cover, in a pre-made cover, if a designer is willing to do that. So think about, if you want a pre-made cover, think about how your title is going to look and if a designer can make tweaks to it. Okay. Hope that makes sense.
That's an amazing example. Thank you.
Good example to use. And let's go back to our little questionnaire. All right. So title, very important to think about a cover in terms with the title. That is the whole goal. Well, the whole goal of a cover is genre, but the whole goal is to tell what the title of the book is too. So that's very important, figuring out your length, what your author name is, if you have a best-selling tagline or anything else that you want to include. And then her category is romance, contemporary. And her main tropes are second chance, which is a huge popular trope right now, accidental pregnancy, and then a gay best friend, which is more of a universal fantasy, but I thought I'd include it, so that's all right. That's always good. Sometimes this would be hard to portray in a cover without it coming across as a reverse harem. So if you have a best friend kind of thing, that's a guy that you think, oh, I want to include that in the cover, sometimes you have to think, that may not be presenting the right final product in the end. So you have to think about things like that. The book is sweet. So kissing and touching, usually waist up, fade to black, may be discussed, but no description. So that's important for me to know, because I don't want to put them in a very sexual embrace on the cover if we decide to do a couple cover. And then the words that Tammy picked out to describe her book are emotional, hopeful, dramatic, tearjerker, realistic, snarky sisters, page turner, and a happily ever after. So the words that I pick up on here for me as a cover designer are emotional, dramatic, and hopeful. To me, those are the most important terms in that how we want to portray that cover. We want an emotional cover. We want people to see that cover and just immediately say, I'm going to get an emotional story from that. So those are the important words for me. Tearjerker would fall under there as well. And then where does your story take place? What's the setting? So we have fall to winter. So in fall, we have such beautiful colors to work with. If we went with a fall theme, or winter, we could always do winter. But with winter, you have to be somewhat leery, because you don't want your cover to look Christmas all year round, because Christmas books, they usually are popular in July and around this time. So we definitely don't want to go full heavy winter theme. So I kind of like a fall theme. And then generic upstate New York. So you have to visualize what you think of upstate New York. For upstate New York, I think trees and mountains like the Catskills and things like that. So those kind of things are in the back of my mind as I'm thinking about this cover. Then we have a description of the characters. So our male main character, he's tall and stocky, has blonde hair and blue eyes. And immediately my thought is it's very difficult to find blonde male photos. Most of our models, it seems to be, they all have brunette hair. A lot. There are some blonde stock images of guys, so we'll make that work. But the good thing is if you find a guy that's perfect, but he has brown hair, we can change that hair to blonde. So we are good there. And then our female character, she's tall, slightly longer than shoulder length, brown hair with golden highlights and hazel eyes. Now, it's good to know the eye color, but in images, we're not going to look for that particular eye color, because eye color is the easiest thing to change. And then I thought this was a wonderful little tidbit about our female character, and that is that she has an affinity to a maroon sweater. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking if I could find a cool stock image of a girl with a sweater, I'm going to make that sweater maroon. Now, I'm going to show you another thing that Danica and Tammy sent me a little bit later, talking about the focus of the female character, how she is going to focus on the female a bit more. And so I received this beautiful image of this pregnant woman, and so she used this as inspiration for the character. So I have this kind of visualization for the main character now. So when I'm looking for stock images, I'm going to keep that in mind. Okay. All right, let's get back to the completed questionnaire. This is where I got to get back to the right page. We don't have any key symbols, so I'm not going to worry about that. But if we did want to focus on a kind of an object only cover. This is when I would go back to my client and say, hey, do you have any particular things that you might want to include on the cover? And then these are the 3 covers that Tammy liked. So this is a illustrated cover. I like it in that the title is nice and big and long, and we have some artwork. It looks almost like a winery kind of thing in these glasses with spaghetti and the lips. So this kind of gives me an idea of what it might be about. I'm thinking a winery and something about a foodie, maybe. Could be totally wrong. But this is an illustrated cover, so that tells me that Tammy may be up for an illustrated style cover. So that will be a consideration that we do. And then she sent this one, a baby for the billionaire cowboy. So this is a very common book cover for your small town romance, for your cowboy romance, where you have your love interest. And of course you already know a trope. You don't need to read the title. You can tell she's pregnant. You can tell he's a cowboy because he has the cowboy hat. And then we have a beautiful kind of farm field scene in the background. So that gives me an idea right there, just looking at that cover. And then this one right here, this Catherine Cowles Shadows of You, this is what I call a split cover. So you have typically an image of a couple up top with some sort of scenic element down at the bottom, and they're kind of faded together. And this particular one has some watercolor splashes, and it looks like this image of the mountains is kind of a watercolor. I absolutely love this cover. I've been drawn to it for quite some time, and I actually have a lot of clients show me this cover as one that they absolutely loved. So this cover has been an answer to this particular question in a lot of cases. So now the thing about split covers like this particular trend was very popular about 5 or 6 years ago. It's like everybody discovered how they could merge photos in Photoshop. So they decided to come up with a bunch of covers of 2 images merged together like that. So it was popular 5 or 6 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have not done it for a client, but because I follow a lot of small town, I follow the Amazon small town book covers intensively for hot new releases as well as bestsellers. There is an uptrend for this particular split style cover. So in today's world, I know that it'll be okay if I present my client with this particular style of cover. So trends can go away and then they can come back. So that's something that you need to know. You need to know where that trend is at. So we're going to take a look at small town romances just so we can see, is that trend still happening in this world? A month ago when I did the research, it still was. And then she also provided some covers that she does not like. This particular one, definitely too steamy. In this particular cover, this doesn't look like a romance at all. And yeah, this is a nice cover, but it doesn't tell me that it's a romance cover. So I know what direction to not go in when I do concepts for Tammy. Okay. And then she has her blurb. All right. So that's why the questionnaire is really important to complete and do a very thorough knowledge, because it gives the cover designer, a lot of information and what direction we need to go in. All right. So does anybody have any questions at this point?
Do you want to stop sharing screen for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me.
One question, when you mentioned how blonde men are not easy to find in stock photos, do you have any recommendations specifically for finding people of color? When you have?
That's another difficult one. You There are some people of color available on stock images. There's also a couple of specialty stock sites that you can always check. Another thing, and some people may not have the budget for it, but another thing to look at is look for a local photographer. Maybe you have a friend that's a local photographer and say, hey, I really need help here. I need, and give your description of your people. I just want to see if you have any ideas on how I could have a couple like that on a book cover. Look on Instagram at photographers as well. A lot of authors will follow certain photographers, and they've actually approached people before and say, hey, I love this image. Would you be willing to sell me the rights to use it as my book cover? And there was this really beautiful, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I wish I had it as an example of an author who saw this. I believe it was a photo shoot from their engagement session with a photograph, and she fell in love with it. And the couple was exactly like the perfect description of her characters. And she just simply asked the photographer and the couple, hey, I would really like to use this for my book cover. Would you let me purchase a license to use this? And they said yes.
Wow.
And then she used them again in future books, which was great. So think out of the box for those kind of things. If you have a neighbor that kind of fits that description, you're like, I wonder if they'd be interested in doing a little photo shoot with me. So think about those.
You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there, because then your husband's like, you're looking at neighbor Bob as a hero for you. No,
I actually did that for my first 2 books. I did my own cover with my photographer, and it worked out wonderfully. But I just was trying to evolve and see, because we did it. So I was like, isn't there a way to do this more? I mean, they both sold better than me going where I'm doing now, but I just thought maybe there was a better way, and I just have not been able to find anything.
Unfortunately, it is difficult, but people are aware of the issue. And so a lot of the people who do custom photography for book covers, they're aware of it, and they try to provide more options. But the problem is, a lot of these custom photographers, if you want an exclusive image from them, you are paying high dollar for it, unfortunately. And your book may never make that money up. We hope it does. We hope it sells a lot so you can recover that money. So that's another thing that you have to think about, is how much money am I willing to put into this, that I hopefully will be able to recoup those expenses. Now I'm gonna get real with you here. I am a young adult romance author. I am not a successful young adult romance author. I do it for fun. If you look at my books on Amazon, you may see them in the 100,000 in the Kindle store, or you may see them in the millions. Okay, so it's a wide range depending on if I sell or not. But because I'm a cover designer, I did not have to invest a ton of money into my covers because I was able to do them myself. But had I just been an author and didn't have the ability to do my own covers, I probably would have paid several hundred for each cover. And I published my first book in 2019. I would have never, to this point today, I would have never have recuperated those costs had I actually purchased a book cover from a designer during that time. So think about that. Okay, that's very important. Next week, I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions on how we can keep those book cover expenses down. But when it comes to people of color, you just have to really look. There are some really good stock out there, but you just have to search for it. So it can be difficult. And I love that you did a photo shoot and found some people that would work for you. And if you know people that kind of would work, just ask. It may be a great alternative to do for your book.
Okay,
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
and then we'll jump
Kudos
back
to you.
Um,
All right.
So illustrated covers.
Mhm.
I was seeing the pictures that you were calling illustrated.
Uh-huh.
What if we want something more realistic but still drawn? Is that still called illustrated, or does that have a different name?
There's a bunch of different levels. Okay. So there are things that people will take a photograph and they'll overpaint on it. So it's more of a realistic look, but you can tell it's painted on. There are so many different types, and I'll pull up a slide real quick from a presentation that I did a couple last year. Let's see if I can find it. Let me pull up one more. There's so many different styles of illustrated covers, and I'm not going to be able to find it, but hopefully I will. I want to show you the different levels of types of characters that are out there for illustrated covers. Here we go. Perfect. So this right here, oh, I got to share my screen again, don't I? All right, let me share my screen again. Okay. All right, so this right here, this was from a presentation I did last year specifically on illustrated covers. Now with illustrated covers, you can find stock like this one right here. This is a cute little couple drinking a glass of wine. I think in the original stock, they were in front of a fireplace. So you could use stock as is for your illustrated covers. These have a little bit more of a cartoony look. So you have to be okay with that. But now you're talking about more realistic. So here is manipulated stock. So the girl on the left here is what the original stock image looked like, but this particular author was doing a Christmas story and wanted her to look like an elf. So I tweaked this girl here to be more Christmas related. You can still see she has the same jacket, the same skirt, different boots. She has on a hat, a different necklace. So we tweaked it accordingly to match the elf kind of theme. And then this is an example of a custom illustration that an artist drew for a particular character. So this definitely has more of a realistic look. And then all of these right here, these are all stock images of what I call illustrated characters, ranging from very cartoony to pretty realistic. So this couple right here, this looks pretty realistic. So it depends on what type of realistic level you want. The biggest thing is if you are planning to hire a cover designer, or if you want an artist to draw a character for you, make sure you find one that matches the style that you are looking for. Now, for me, I specialize in illustrated covers, and me and my sister, between the two of us, we have 4 different styles that we draw. And so this is what I'll show to people who may be interested in my cover services. I'll say, these are the types of illustrations that we draw. Do you like that? Is that the style you're looking for? And if not, I might know a particular artist that does the style that you're looking for, or we can do a little bit of research and find that. A good place to look for artists is on Instagram. There are so many talented artists out there that probably do it. They don't do it for a living. They do it because they love drawing, and they've never thought about how they can turn that aspect of what they love into a business. So approach somebody that you love their style. They may have never done something on a book cover before, but they can at least draw the characters for you. And then you could come and work with a cover designer with that particular art that they drew, and a cover designer can help you bring it all together. Or the cover designer, or you could actually DIY it yourself at that point, because you would have the artwork. You would just need to figure out what type of background you would want to use, and then your typography. So create a mood board on what you like, what you're looking for, what level of illustration it is, and then if you're not sure where to find a person like that, my door is always open. I love helping people out and just say, hey, Stephanie, this is the look I'm going for. Where do you think I could get that done? And I will try to help you and point you in the right direction. Okay. Was that helpful? Good, 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 good. All right. So next thing we are going to look at is, or is there any questions before we move on? No. All right. So the next thing we're going to look at is the bestsellers. All right. Now, when we're researching our genres, there are a couple ways to do this. And I'm going to show you my way. And beginning in January, I am going to do this monthly, in that I'm going to spend about 2 or 3 hours doing a YouTube video on the trends that I see in certain romance subgenres. Okay, so I'll give Danica the information on that so you can follow along. It's very important. If, let's say, you have a book that you're releasing in June, but you don't have a cover for it yet, start researching now, because then you're going to be able to see those trends that are happening in your particular subgenre. And then also, if you hire a cover designer, that's a very basic thing that they should be doing. Also, going back to the illustrated covers, make sure you hire if you do hire a cover designer, make sure you hire a cover designer who specializes in your genre. That's very, very important. You may have a cover artist who does fabulous fantasy covers, but if you're doing just a contemporary romance, but you love their style, that's not going to be a very good match for you, because they will not focus on doing the necessarily genre work that a true romance cover designer would be doing. All right. So what we're going to do, what I like to do is we are, let me pull this back up. We are working on finding information for Tammy. So she's got romance, contemporary. Now, contemporary is a very broad area, but she's got second chance, accidental pregnancy, and we know it's in upstate New York. So upstate New York kind of gives me a small town vibe. So we're going to think about that as well. So what I like to do is, the first thing I do, I just go to Google. I don't start on Amazon. I'll just say Amazon best selling contemporary romance covers. Okay. It would help if I could type romance books. All right. So when this comes up, there's typically 2 links to look for. There's one that says Amazon, and I'll try to zoom in so we can see a bit better. Amazon ZGBS digital text, and there's the same thing, but it says books. Okay, which one should we pay attention to? I always pay attention to digital text, because that means the ebooks, which is what I think we need to focus on. Books are actually paperback, and so the bestseller lists differ from paperback to ebooks. And a lot of the books that are going to be paperback are probably going to be traditional. So I try to not pay attention to a lot of the traditional book covers, because they have a marketing budget, and certain authors could probably do a black cover with just their name on it and no other information, and that book is going to sell because of who the author is. So those are the things I don't like to look at when it comes to looking at the bestseller list. I really want to focus on indie authors. So anything that is typically in Kindle Unlimited can give you a clue that it may be an indie author. Now, 5 or 6 years ago, this research was easy, because there was a huge divide between traditional book covers and our indie author book covers. But the beauty of it is that authors and cover designers in the indie world have worked so hard that line is very, very blurred now, and that there's a lot of similarities between indies and traditional. However, some of them are just going to be different. So we are not going to focus on those. All right, so I like to look at the digital text, and we are going to look at these. All right, so the bestsellers in contemporary romance. So when I open this up in Amazon, here is our romance category, and here are all the subcategories that are on this bestseller list. And so these sub areas are ones that you really want to pay attention to and say, hey, my book falls under mafia romance. Let me watch this for a couple of months. Or it's a historical romance, or it's sports, small town romance. What area are we really going to focus on? Now, contemporary is a broader area, and we are going to see a large range of covers. So here we see an illustrated, we see illustrated, we see illustrated, we see an object cover, we see a man cover, couple cover, object cover. This one, you could kind of say it's an object cover, then we have a man cover. So looking at the contemporary category on Amazon, you really can't focus on a lot of the cover trends. Okay, so we see a little bit of everything here. Okay, so when we go into more of the individual categories, we're going to start seeing a little bit more continuity between the covers. And it may be based on the typography, on what we're seeing on the cover, whether it's just a single guy, whether it's a couple, whether it's an object, or whether it's an illustrated cover. So that's important to look at. But as you can see, there's no continuity here. So following this category would be very, very difficult. But it is good to look at it every now and again, because then you can see what type of books are selling. Are they more steamy? Are they more sweet? You will notice that there are a lot of hockey covers on this list. So hockey is a huge trope right now. And here's a similar cover to that was on the ones that Tammy liked. So it's good to see that that's all the way up in the contemporary list. Another thing that I like to do is I like to go to the last cover on that list and just look at it. And what I pay attention to, all right, this is a man chest. This is a tattooed guy. We know it's a fake marriage romance. I like to see where it is at in the Kindle store, okay? Because that way you're going to know, is this a good cover comp to use? If the last book on that 100 bestseller list for that particular subgenre is like in the millions, probably not, or maybe 50,000, depending on the category, it may not be the best cover comp to use. But because this is a huge contemporary romance category, the last book on that 100 bestseller list is probably going to be pretty high up. So this is currently 266 in the Kindle store. So that's something to look at. Now I'm going to look at more of maybe time travel. Time travel, we're going to look at that 100 list, and we're going to see how big time travel is. So this just kind of helps you gauge how strong the category is on Amazon. It's 34,000. Okay, so it's not a bestseller, but it is selling a few books. Okay, so that's important to know. So pay attention to those numbers as well, and that way you could determine whether it would be a good cover comp to use. All right, so what we're going to do for Tammy here is we are going to look at a couple of specific categories. I know Tammy mentioned this is sweet, and so sometimes clean and wholesome and sweet are there is a difference, but there isn't a sweet category here that we can look at. So we're going to look at clean and wholesome just to kind of gauge if we can notice any cover trends in clean and wholesome that a lot of times will piggyback into the sweet world. So we're going to look at that. And then we're also going to look at small town romance. So I'm going to focus on those two things. And if there was a second chance category, that would be a good one to look at. But this is just going to kind of give us an idea of what to look for in our particular cover category. That's time traveler. All right, so here we are. This is clean and wholesome. So we are looking at, we're going to look. All right. These are just in looking at the first four, these are kind of like object or scene covers. There are no people. The type is fairly large. In this one, we have the author's name bigger, and only do that is if your name sells your book. I personally don't like it. If I ever become a best-selling author, I don't know if I can make my name that big, even though I know that's what's going to sell it, but I still want the title bigger. That's just me though. Pay attention to the scene. All right, so we've got some nice winter scenes. So right now, the covers that are in the bestsellers are going to be more skewed to Christmas. So this may not be the best time to do research, but it'll give you an idea of some typography and stuff like that, which is important. So on these, we're noticing the typography is a combination between a script and a serif type. We'll get into that a little bit later. And so here's another one from Grace Myers. So she must have probably either released a bunch of books together, or she's just trending right now. Here is a illustrated cover, but the thing to notice is that there's no people on this illustrated cover, so we just have the snow globe. Here's another Christmas scene, Christmas. Everything is Christmas right now. And we're in the top 10, and we haven't seen any couple covers or any single guy covers. So that's something to note, that you know, there may be a trend of going away from those single hot guy covers. So that's something to put in the back of our mind as we're doing research. Here is a very common cover right now of an illustrated couple. The great thing about illustrated covers, and we're going back to finding people of color, illustrated covers are a great way to be able to build your characters however you want. So if your genre calls for illustrated covers, or if there's a trend towards illustrated covers, think about doing an illustrated cover, because you can make them look however you want. So that's important to know. This is probably a historical as well, so I wouldn't use this as a cover comp. Here's another illustrated cover with two characters. Here's another illustrated cover, and then here we get into we can tell the trope from this one without reading the title is that there's going to be a kid involved. So there's a child, and this looks like a cowboy, and we have a barn. But of course, we already knew that because of the title as well. Number 19, this is the first single guy cover that we saw. So again, that may be a trend that is not very popular right now. Here is an illustrated cover. Again, I wouldn't pay attention to this one because this is historical. So there's some that are just, even though they're in that category, they may not be relevant to that. This is a illustrated cover. This is a little different than what we are used to seeing, in that most of the time we have two characters and we show their full body, such as this. Whereas these sweater weather covers, These are romantic comedy, sweet romantic comedy, and they feature a big character and then a small character. So that these are fairly new. So this is a trend we need to think about. Do I need to maybe do a big illustrated character? Again, we're going to ignore the more historical styles. But yeah, we're not seeing, here's another.
I'm shocked that like over 90% of these are Christmas books covers.
It's the season.
But yeah. So actually, Stephanie, because it is this time of year and these are all holiday, how much do the holiday covers represent the what we would expect to find at other times of year?
We still can look at the basics. Is it a scene? During Christmas time, there may be more scenic kind of things, like we have the Christmas tree, but we can still see basic things like the character. Is it full of single guys? I like to come back and look at it this way, and we can see the more common things. If you wanted to, you could kind of zone out the Christmas ones and just focus on the individual things. For example, even though this is Christmas, it's still a farm, it's still a cowboy, it's still a kid. So we can get a sense of the trope. For the illustrated covers, we can see those are still popular, whether it's a Christmas cover or not. So just look at the components that make up the particular cover. A scene, illustrated, a single guy. So ignore, kind of filter out the Christmas aspects and just look at those individual elements. Typography. The typography is probably going to be universal no matter the time or season. Okay, so that's something important to look at. But yeah, these were fall covers, so these were not necessarily falling under Christmas, but you're right, everything else is. So that question right there is an important thing to think about, is when you're doing your research. All right, now this isn't the best example because it is Christmas season and everything is covered by Christmas, but we can still pick out those small components. So it would be important for you to do research over a couple of months. And that's why it's starting in January. At the beginning of every month, I'm going to go through the covers at that moment in time so we can kind of start tracking where the trends are going. So do that yourself for your particular subgenre as well. All right, so in looking at this for clean and wholesome romance, which you'll notice a lot of these said sweet on the cover, so that's important to know. We are seeing a lot of scenes. Now, whether the scenes are Christmas related, that's something to think about. And we're still seeing a lot of illustrated covers. Illustrated covers are huge in the sweet category and the clean and wholesome category. That is a trend that has been happening for many years. And it continues to happen in those categories. So that's something to think about. Also in sports romance, a lot of the covers are going towards that illustrated look. So if you like it and are okay with that for your cover, that would definitely be an option to go with. Now, a lot of people think that illustrated covers are new. They're not new. They've been around for a while, and traditional publishers have been using illustrated covers in the romance world for many, many years. What's happening is that illustrated covers are becoming more accessible to indie authors. They're finding the artists to draw their characters. Cover designers are offering that style of cover now. So it's not that this is all new, it's just that it's accessible. And that's important to note. Is it starting to go down? I don't think so, but I'm a little, I like them. So I may not be the best to judge that, but I do watch the trend. Okay. So in this category, we are seeing the scenic and we are seeing the illustrated covers. And so that's two things to think about. Another thing is pay attention to the typography, and you can see the typography best when you view them at thumbnail like this. How much area is the title taking up on the cover real estate? Okay, so we need to look at the cover in thirds. You have the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. How much of that cover is the title taking up? Most of these are going to be at least a third, if not half, and some of them take up even more space. So that is something to pay attention to when you're looking at the covers, is that space that the title is carrying. Colors. Right now, we're going to be skewed more towards Christmas theme. So this isn't the best time to check. So colors is one thing to look at, and the style of cover, whether you have a single guy, a single woman, a couple, illustrated, scene, or object cover, floral, things like that. We're not seeing a lot of floral covers. Here is a floral cover, but we also have characters on it, so that's something to note. Yeah, so this is our clean and wholesome. Now, we're going to look at the hot new releases for this same category. We're going to see a lot of the same books, but we're going to see a lot of different ones. So Amazon, how to look for the hot new releases is I do the same thing. Amazon, hot new releases, clean and wholesome romance. We're going to get those, pay attention because this is best again. And this is new releases, digital text. So this is what we want to look for. We want to look for those new releases. Now, why do we pay attention to new releases? This is where we're going to identify those cover trends, okay? So you can look at bestsellers, but the hot new releases are going to be those cover trends that we're going to be able to identify as we follow these bestseller and hot new releases over the next couple of months. Okay, so a lot of these you'll notice are very similar, are the same from our bestsellers right now. But then once we get towards the end of the list, we're going to start seeing some different ones. Okay, so again, we're seeing the scenes. Here's a couple, and here's an illustrated cover, and more illustrated covers. Here's a single guy. Again, scenes, lots of scenic covers. Here is an illustrated cover. Again, I am zoning out the historical ones. Here is a cowboy one, but it's also a scene, and it's that split cover that we were talking about. So we have a couple here, and then we have like this wintry farm scene down below. So we know that split cover is something that could work. Here's another split cover. And so again, go to that number 100 and look and see where this book is on the bestseller. Now, this is an illustrated cover, and it is in 14,000 in the Kindle store. So that's not too bad. I typically try to pay attention to maybe the top 10,000 in the Kindle store is a good gauge, but that also depends on your subgenre. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of the same things that we did for bestsellers, in that we have scenes and we have illustrated. Those are kind of what I think would be the top ones. Okay, so now let's look at the small town romance ones.
Hey, can I give you a time check that we've only got 20 minutes?
Oh,
so
yes.
do we want to jump over to the actually starting to design?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. All right, let's skip over that then, and we will run into, I will get Photoshop going. Let's close this down. All right, so now when I get started designing, and if you are DIYing, this may be a good place to start. No matter what program you use, I recommend creating what I consider a base template to use for your book cover. Now, mine is going to look a little weird because when I design book covers, I actually think about what's called the trim. which I'll talk about in a minute, the bleed area of the cover. I like to think about the spine, and I like to think about the back cover. So when I'm designing any book cover, I start with this basic layout. Okay, for every single book, this is what it is. I'm going to hide. I have this little layer that hides the back cover so I can focus just on the front cover as I'm designing. And this is what I work on. We're going to take a look at, we're going to hide everything, and we're going to take a look at our guides that we have here. The black area is the size of a printed book cover as it's printed. All right. So when book covers are printed, they have what's called the bleed area around the edges. So this black area right here is actually going to get trimmed off. Okay. So when we have a print cover, we need to think about that trim area, and we need to make sure our artwork extends into that area. So it's important to think about that as you're designing your front cover, because you may have fabulous artwork, but you didn't consider the bleed. So when you go to do a paperback cover for your book, you have to think about that bleed area, and you may have something important there that you want people to see that's going to get cut off. So if we think about the bleed as we're designing it, we are already one step ahead when we get to the paperback cover. All right, so this particular one, I start, even if my author is doing a 5 1/4 by 8 or a 5 by 8 or 5 1/2 by 8 book, for the ebook cover, I design it as a 6 by 9 book. Reason being is that is the most visually appealing layout, in my opinion. So that's why I designed it at 6 by 9 at 300 DPI, which is 2400 by something. I don't know the exact pixels, but that's what I do. You can do a 5 by 8 as an ebook cover, but what happens is the aspect ratio of a 5 by 8 to me isn't as pleasing as the aspect ratio of a 6 by 9, because a 5 by 8 is going to be kind of tall and narrow, whereas a 6 by 9, we're able to think in terms of what I like to use in a design term as the rule of thirds. And so I can really easily break the cover down into that rule of thirds. All right, now this orangey color, this is the actual book size. So this black area is the part that's going to get trimmed. And so anything in this orange area should make the cover. So we want to make sure that anything is important is contained within that area. Then we have the spine. And then we have what I call the safe zone. So in this area, this is where your text needs to fall. Okay. This is another thing that I see a lot of DIY authors get wrong, is that they'll have text in this darker orange area here, and you really don't want that. You need that white space. Now you can have your artwork here, but type needs to be within this yellow area here. Okay. And then the spine has that same safe zone. We want all our type on our spine to be in this area. So this is a basic layout for a cover. When I'm designing a cover, this is where I start. I have a template saved on my computer. I'm sorry?
How big is that area? Is that like a centimeter? Is it?
It's inches. This is a 6 by 9 book cover with a 1-inch spine. So the actual dimensions here of my canvas are 13.25 by 9.25. And that includes that 1/8 of an inch bleed around every corner. Okay. And if you work in Photoshop and want to play around, let me know. I will send you my template and you can play around with it as well. But design your
How
own
big
if
is
you
your
want.
safe zone?
My safe zone is, it needs to be 1/4 of an inch away from the trim area.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right, so on my template, I automatically have just some basic type. So what we're going to do now is we are going to input Tammy's information here. So let's see, I like to copy things. So we're just going to copy her author name so I don't make any mistakes. So we are going to fill that in here. Whoops, it's always, things are not going to cooperate when I'm doing things live. So here is her author name. I'm not going to pay attention to the typography just yet. That's a whole nother level, and that's something that we'll definitely pay attention to next week. Right now, I am just going to input the title. And so I personally like to, so sometimes love isn't enough. I like to have each word on its own line. So we're just going to do that. Sometimes love.
You misspelled sometimes.
Oh, thank you. That's why doing things live is always fun. Sometimes. And love isn't. And then we are going to, now we're not going to pay attention to the how this looks, but we just know. Okay, so that's our title. It's all mismatched now, but the reason why I like to type each word separately is because then we can play around with it we can determine how we want to lay it out without having to change the line spacing and stuff like that. We can move the words around a little bit easier. And that's just the way I like to work. So I think that's a good way to work, especially if you have a long title. Okay, so here is our basics. Now, when I design book covers for people, I start with 2 concepts. And so my first concept idea is to do that split cover. And so what we're going to do next is we're just going to go to a stock site, and I use a million different stock sites. The ones to avoid are going to be the ones that offer free images. Okay, that's very important, like Pixabay, Pexels. They say all their images are free, but one of the things, if you use people on your cover, you need to make sure that there is a model release form signed saying that person has given that photographer permission to use this image on all of these different stock sites. So going back to looking for your own people for your cover and taking a picture of them, make sure you have them sign a model release form, because you don't ever want them to come back and sue you for something. So that's very, very important. A lot of the big stock sites, such as Shutterstock and Deposit Photos, they are going to have model release forms. So we're just going to take a look at this. And you can look at file information, and you can tell that this may have, let's see, they may not have the information on here, but it will tell you that you can use these for personal and commercial use as extended or enhanced license. So as long as the image isn't flagged for editorial use only, that's important. Okay. So what we're just going to say, Shutterstock, Deposit Photos, Adobe Stock, those are going to be all great stock sites to use. I also like to look at iStock Photo. And the great thing about iStock is that they do have some exclusive images. And I'm just going to type in pregnant couple, because pregnancy is one of our tropes. The cool thing about iStock is they have this only from iStock, so you can find some more useful, some images that may not have seen on other book covers before. They may not be as popular, so that's always good to use. You can spend hours upon hours searching through stock sites when you're doing your own covers. So just be aware that you're going to be Alice and you're going to fall into Wonderland when you start looking for stock images. I could get a lot of my life back if I took all the hours that I've spent on stock sites and suddenly gained that time back. So just know it is a rabbit hole and you are going to fall down it. But to me, I like it. It's fun. It's relaxing. I like to look through them. And if I see a image that really speaks to me, I will often save it. And I might come back and use that for a pre-made one day. So there's nothing really drawn to me just yet. I like this particular photo. I don't necessarily like her face, but I liked the background, and it kind of has that one pregnancy image that Tammy sent to us. There's something about the vibe of that photo I get from this one as well. Now, if you see a particular image that you like, but you may not necessarily like the pose, always come down. A lot of times the photographer will flag them as being taken from the same series. So you can see a bunch of other images of those same models taken in the same environment. So I think this is a really sweet photo with the hat up. This would work well, not particularly for the book cover that we're working on now, but this would work well for if you wanted to do a single image book cover. We could have the couple in the bottom half of the image of the book cover, and then we would extend the background with the sky, and we would be able to have a large area for the top half of the cover for the photographer. I'm sorry, for the type. And this is a quick and easy cover that you could do yourself, is if you see an image that works really, really well for your book, such as this. The great thing about Photoshop is that it has the ability to fill areas. So we're going to do a content aware fill, and Photoshop is going to analyze this particular photo and determine what it's going to fill up here. So you can kind of see just the continuation of the white sky. So then we can add the typography on top. We would play around with, this isn't the best typography in the world, but something like this, if we change the type, could definitely work for a book cover. If we looked at it from a thumbnail standpoint, we see there's a couple on it. We see there is a title on it. We can read the title. The author name, we would need to do a little bit of work on to help it stand out. But with some proper type treatment, which is something that we're going to talk about a lot next week, we can turn this into something that would work really well. Now, this is not necessarily the vibe I want to go with Tammy's book, because one of the things we need to remember for her book is emotional. Now, this image, although it's nice, it doesn't evoke like that tear-jerker emotion for me. Okay. It looks sweet, which is good, but it doesn't have enough of that emotional aspect. They look too happy. For Tammy's book, based on what I've read in the blurb, is we want them to have a little bit of conflict or questioning, to give that emotional aspect of it. So for Tammy's book, this isn't necessarily going to work, but for anything else with the proper type treatment, we can definitely play around with this. Now, I'm going to take this image, and while between today and next week's session, I'm going to turn this into a book cover for you, and I'm going to show you how I did it. And then you can see the end results. Okay, since we're kind of running out of time today. So let's go back and look at, that was one that I had found earlier when I was doing a bit of research that I thought created that kind of emotional connection that I wanted to evoke for her particular cover. And of course, now I'm not going to be able to find it, but we'll just keep on looking. And Tammy, as I'm looking through these, if anything really stands out to you, you know, just it's about the pose and about the embrace, the overall vibe for it. And you don't have to pay attention to the background of some of these images, because we're going to remove that. Okay. Now I can't find the image that I knew I should have saved it, but we will just keep on looking. Now this one's another sweet one, but it's not going to give us quite that emotional connection. And you'll notice that I'm not really paying attention to how they look. I'm not looking for a blonde guy because I know I can make that change myself. So I'm really looking about the overall pose and if it's going to give me that feeling that I'm interested in, that emotional connection with someone. Okay. All right. So I know we are low on time. So what I'm going to do over the next week is I'm going to continue recording my process of finding a good couple for that split cover scene. And then I'm also going to look at doing an illustrated cover because that is popular for the sweet trope. And the beauty about that with the illustrated scene is that we're going to really evict that emotional aspect, because that second chance, if you read the blurb of Tammy's book, there's a lot of conflict between the couple. She's pregnant. She was hoping that it would be something that could save their marriage, to bring that second chance aspect to them. So she's hoping this surprise pregnancy can get them there. But from the blurb, it looks like they do split up, and there's some other unknown. So with the illustrated cover, we're going to be able to display that friction. Whereas I'm going to have a guy standing with his back to the female character. So there'll be a little bit of back to back. And there's going to be we're going to see that friction and that emotional aspect of it. So stay tuned for next week as we're going to look at those cover concepts next week. And then we're going to move into doing something in Canva. So
do you want to stop sharing your screen so we
yes,
can
ma'am, we will.
Thank you. A question for you. So Tammy shared an image with you. When I was working with my first series with a cover designer, she gave me access to her portfolio of man chests and said, is there someone here that appeals to you? And then she also, when I was struggling to find one, she sent me to the different stock sites and said, find your own damn guy because you're being too picky. Do many people do that? Is that an okay thing to do?
I actually, as a cover designer, I have 3 different levels of covers. I have what's called a typography plus. I have a custom cover that's photo manipulated, and then the custom illustrated covers. For my typography plus cover, which is it's only $75 for the cover. So it's a very low cost point, but it's because you do the work. You let me know which image you want on that cover. I'm going to take that image and I'm going to do some color correction to it, some adding certain elements to it, and I'm going to add the typography on it, but you pick that image. So that's always, when we're talking about tips for working to keep your budget down, a cover designer who offers that option is always great. If you're going to do some of the work, because stock search sometimes can be 50% of the work of a cover. So if you're going to do that work for me, I'm going to give you a lower cost point for it. So yes, you can pick your own covers. Yeah. So, and I'll show you real quick. I'm going to do one more screen share before we go. And I'm going to show you This is a cover that I'm working on in progress. This is book 2 for a small town romance. And this is, so when I work with my clients, I'm going to show you real quick. So let me share my screen. Zoom, where are we at? Too many things on the screen to try to figure out. All right, share screen. We're going to share real quick. All right, so when I do cover concepts for a client, I often go with different couples. So this particular, now we already had the basic because this is book 2 in this particular series. So we have already established the base design. So now we just need to find a background and a couple. So this is what I like to do. I start out, sometimes I'll do just 2 concepts and sometimes I'll do 3. So here are the concepts that I provided her, and they had different backgrounds, different couples. But then if I didn't feel like I had enough information on the couple and I really wanted to give her more ideas based on the information that she provided, I'll just kind of dump a bunch of different couples, and that helps me learn what vibe she wants to go for on this particular book. So depending on your cover designer, some cover designers may not take that extra step, and some may give you a million different options. So it really depends on the cover designer, but something like this is good if you're DIYing yourself, to really kind of dump those images of different covers. And I didn't purchase any of these. These are all just the watermarked versions. I see them all together, and so I know which one I can gravitate towards that I know will work in a particular book cover. So I picked what I thought were the 3 strongest ones, but I gave her options of ones that we could also use depending. So
amazing. I'm just blown away by the $75 if we provide the image, because
yeah.
that, I mean, at that point, I think $75 or a whole day of my time to try to DIY a cover and get the typography, because typography, in my opinion,
huge.
Is the hardest part.
Yes. Yes. Typography
So,
is an art form all
absolutely
itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we will touch upon that next week, but I'm also going to I'm going to do a lot of supplemental videos for you, just so you can know. I've done a lot of presentations, so I have a lot of things that I can share with you guys just to give you the knowledge. I have a whole typography. Unfortunately, the presentation is about 3 hours long, but you can, at least when you have free time, you can learn a little bit more about the typography.
I mean, and that
basics.
tells you right there how challenging the typography is and why.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. And that presentation probably could have been 5 hours.
I'm sure it can be a degree, right? It can be a whole college degree.
Exactly.
Any questions before we let Stephanie go? And for a week, we don't actually let her go because she's going to go and keep working on Tammy's covers.
I would love to know what sites you use again, so that we can look at them. So maybe Danica can put them in the group or in the
absolutely
somewhere.
I'll give you a list of ones that I highly recommend, and then I'll also let you know the ones that you should avoid. Because you really want, the most important thing is you really want to make sure there's a model release on file for that couple. There's been a lot of horror stories about people who have used photos on some of the free sites that did not have model releases, that people were sued. Even using those images in advertising can get you in trouble. So I will definitely give you a list of the ones that you should definitely look at. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go? All right. Well, on Stephanie, this was thank goodness we were smart enough to book 90 minutes. This was mind blown.
I'm long-winded and I'm passionate about it, so I can go on and on. Detail
oriented. Deas, what have you got? Is that a finger up?
I had a thumbs up of yes, it's great.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. All right. So we will see you all again in 1 week and look forward to where this takes us. It's exciting. It's kind of fun.
Yay! Well, I
All right.
can't wait to show it off.
Yay. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone who came out to participate. Happy that you are all here.
Yep.
Boom.
Bye. Thank you.